Good afternoon, everyone. As you file in, feel free to put in the chat where you're joining us from today. And as you do that, want to welcome you to this webinar on benchmarking. As you get settled, a few reminders before we get started. Please use the Q&A function for any questions today, and remember to be constructive in those questions or comments to the presenter and to one another to ensure we have a session that is productive. AIA California will submit one AIA learning unit for those who complete this live session in full. And as always, the webinar content and additional resources will be available online soon. Today's webinar, which explores how benchmarking empowers architecture leaders to meet challenges with clarity and confidence, is brought to you by BQE. And again, it qualifies for one AIA learning unit. Now, to quickly introduce our presenter. As a distinguished thought leader, Steve Burns, FAIA, blends his passion for design and firm management with profound insights into emerging technologies. Over the past 2 decades, working directly with over 1,400 firm owners, Steve has significantly contributed to reshaping these businesses for enhancing growth and sustainability. Steve's career highlights include a 7-year tenure at SOM Chicago, founding BBA Architects in 1993 and growing it to a 17 architects before its 2007 sale, and creating Arca Office, a groundbreaking project management software company acquired by BQE Software in 2010. Recognized for his significant impact on the profession, in 2009, Steve was elevated to the AIA College of Fellows. And currently, as the founder of the Well-Designed firm, he focuses on leading AE firms to operational excellence, mentoring leaders to craft businesses as elegant and innovative as the architecture they create. So, Steve, it's always great to see you. Please take it away. Oh, Steve, I think that you are on mute.
Ah,
There we
great.
go.
I was just mumbling to myself as I was doing screen share, so nothing was missed there. But let's get started. Okay, so thank you everybody for joining me. We're going to do a topic today, which I think every firm really needs to pay attention to, and it is benchmarking. And we're not going to talk about just what the numbers are. We're going to talk about what you do with these numbers. So hopefully this is going to give you some clear, actionable insights so you could compare your firm to others, see where you stand, and then figure out how you can improve. So today we're going to go through 13 KPIs. These are key performance indicators. These are 13 that were reported in this year's benchmarking report provided by our sponsor, BQE Software. And I think this is really good to look at for a few reasons. One is it doesn't really matter if you are a sole proprietor or a firm with hundreds of employees. You're going to get something out of this particular report, and you'll see that why in a moment. What is really different about this report is it isn't just giving you a single industry average, because that's not really helpful if you are, an 8-person firm and you're comparing yourself to data from firms with 150 people in them. So let's move the slide. So what you'll notice when you get the report, I think it's being made available to you as well. If not, if you haven't already grabbed a copy of it, download this report. It is free. It is two things are going on here. It's not only divided by firm size, and we'll look at that in a moment, but it includes data from over 2,000 firms. This is larger than any survey you will find out there on benchmarking. What else is really interesting about it is it doesn't require firms to be contacted and given a survey report and asking them to fill in information. This is very problematic from my perspective. People will often calculate things in spreadsheets or try to make their own firm look better than maybe they really are. This is a survey of anonymized data from over 2,000 firms who have over 46,000 employees who use that software to actually report what's going on in their firm and what they do. And this software is able to track all of the KPIs that certainly the ones we're going to look at today. So that's really amazing to have that large of a pool and have it in such a way that it is truly uh, unbiased information. So as I go through the report with you, I'm going to explain how the KPIs are calculated, and maybe more importantly, how do you actually apply that to what's going on in your firm so you can make smarter, more informed decisions. So it's not just about the numbers, it's how you can turn those numbers into some real action. So the first KPI we're going to go through, and some of them I'm going to spend a little bit more time on than others. That will make sense, and I want to make sure we have enough time for the Q&A at the end. So I apologize if I kind of go through some of these a little too fast for you. But the first one is your revenue per full-time employee, and it is one of my favorite metrics because it does give you actually a very honest look at how efficient your firm truly is. The way you calculate it is you take your total net revenue, and you just divide that by the number of full-time employees. And that means everyone, not just your billable staff or your technical team, because in the end, it's the revenue that you earn from your projects that needs to cover the full cost of running your business. And it does include all of your overhead and your marketing and your administrative costs. Now, if you do have any of your staff who are not full-time, you do need to prorate that so that the denominator in this calculation is based on your full-time effort. Now, if you take into account firms of all sizes, which I've already told you earlier on, I don't really want you to focus too much on that, but if you take all the firms, the small ones and the large ones, you're going to come up with about $170,000 for every full-time employee or full-time employee equivalent. But that doesn't actually tell you the full story. So this is the following report. So every page in the report starts out with that big number and the definition and kind of the meaning of it, and then it goes into a bit more detail. Now, if you look at the second quartile, basically this is the middle of the pack. Okay, it's about 50% of the firms are in the middle of the pack. It's about $150,000 per employee. If you look at the high performing firms, those are the firms for each of the KPIs that reside at the top 25 percentile. They are closer to $203,000 per employee. And that, in fact, is the kind of number I like to see when I work with my clients. I almost don't even need to see any other metrics to know that that is going to be a profitable firm who can really afford to invest in improving their business or expanding the business, doing some really exciting things that might be part of a strategic plan. Now, on the other end, the low performing firms in the first quartile are squeaking by at $112,000 of revenue for every one of their employees. Now, I do want to direct your attention to the right side of the page. You're going to see for every one of these KPIs, BQE has analyzed the data by firm size. So again, if your firm is like 4 employees, focus on that first row, 1 to 10. If you have 15, you look at the second row, the 11 to 20 group, and so on. Please always consider these numbers by their cohort. And as we go through these, you're going to kind of see how firms of different sizes can actually have, in some cases, really big differences in their performance. For other KPIs, some of them are actually almost, there's no change. And we could kind of talk about why that might be. It depends on the KPI. So if you are that 8-person firm, it really doesn't make a lot of sense for you to be comparing yourself with that 48-person firm. Now, for this one, the full-time employee revenue, if you are below the benchmark for your cohort, that's really a red flag. Maybe it is time for you to think about how you deploy your team on the projects that you do, maybe whether you're doing the right kind of work that's bringing in the right kind of revenue. By the way, having technology, because I'm going to talk a bit about technology throughout this, gives you real-time access to KPIs. So you don't have to wait for annual reports or wait till you go through the effort of calculating this for yourself, which, as I mentioned earlier, when you have to use spreadsheets to do this, it's generally going to result in incorrect data. The other thing I want to point out, you'll see this on almost every KPI, and you'll see it here on the very bottom right side. Um, it says N equals 694. So even though we know that the larger pool of data was from over 2,000 firms, for every one of the KPIs, what BQE's done is they have disregarded any data from firms that they felt was insufficient or questionable information. Okay, they just got rid of the ones that don't really have a high level of confidence that they're using the software for this calculation properly. And still, even with 694 firms, this is almost more than you'll see in most any other survey out there in the industry that you generally pay a lot of money to get. Here we can get this for free. And again, if you find yourself underperforming, I think your main goal is finding ways, as I mentioned, to optimize your staff effectiveness and do that without increasing the number of employees. And I believe the easiest way you can achieve this is by investing in both improved technologies, but also leveraging those technologies that you've already made your investments in. And lastly, there are two ways you could look at this particular KPI. First of all, it's like a backward-looking metric. It just tells you how did you perform over a particular period. This is an annual report, but you could look at it quarterly or even monthly if you want to. And the other way is to use it for forward-looking. Maybe you have some growth plans, and this metric will help you understand if you are going to be on target to achieve that. If you have an operating budget, you'll know if your revenue is going to be able to support that operating budget. If you plan to hire a new employee or employees, you're going to know what the impact might be. Of course, it's going to drop for the first few months, but what it will do for the long term, as long as you can support that employee. So next up is a similar metric. It's the expenses that your firm incurs for each one of your full-time employees. And I'm going to go through this one a little more quickly. So this is the converse of the previous one. Rather than seeing your revenue, we're looking at your expenses. It takes the full operating expenses of your business, and it just divides that number by the number of full-time employees. And notice there is a huge gap between each quartile. And it is significant to think about it, reflect on maybe why this is happening. I think first is location does matter. So a firm in New York or San Francisco or Los Angeles, they're naturally going to have higher rents, higher salaries, just generally higher overall costs than a firm, let's say in Wichita, Kansas. So while this data is broken down by firm size, which is helpful, I almost would love to see a report in the future that also shows it by region or, urban, suburban, rural, something of that nature, so we could see based on where you're located. So we're to BQE, maybe you can consider that in the future. Now, there's also something interesting with scale. Firms with the 21 to 50 employees actually have a noticeable drop in their expenses. I don't have the raw data. My hunch is it is a benefit of scale. And I think you probably all can appreciate that. And for firms that are larger than 50, I think that's clear. They are probably in a large metropolitan area, and they're going to be subject to those higher expenses. I do want to say, though, that it is very expensive to develop new processes or implement the kinds of technology that truly make, a difference that I'm always trying to promote, that help you improve your project delivery and your efficiencies. It takes time and energy, and of course, an investment of both time and money. But it is not expensive to manage your expenses. And in fact, cost cutting, if you do it strategically, is going to yield some pretty big results. And when you do it right, it's going to have minimal disruption. So as we know, since the post-COVID environment, you might be able to slash your rent by as much as in half just by rethinking how you use your office. Not everybody might be working full time, all the time. You might have remote work being done by everybody or some of the people. So reconsider what you do with your office. Or maybe you want to reduce your insurance premiums. If you could rebid it every couple of years with not always using the same insurance agency, but bidding it out. You can make the difficult decision, if necessary, to actually eliminate a role in your firm if it doesn't turn out that that is adding value. By the way, technology is the way you can connect the dots between the individuals, the work they do, and the value they bring. Almost impossible to do this without technology. So these are just a few ways to immediately reduce your expense load without hurting the quality of your work. And it's actually something you can take on right at the end of today's webinar. You don't have to wait and scale up and spend money. You can actually spend some time thinking about where your money goes. Number three is the profit per full-time employee. So it's the last KPI that they're providing that looks at your company based on the number of staff you have. So it isn't enough just to simply grow your revenue. What matters is whether that growth is actually being converted into profits. And this is the metric that tracks that. We're going to have another profit one a little bit later on. So you might see that your revenue per full-time employee rising year over year, and you're thinking this is great news. But if your profit is not also increasing at the same pace, or worse, you might even see it is declining, that's actually a red flag. Something's going on. It could be with the cost structure of your operations that might be off. I don't know what it is without, get it in there and thinking about it. But this is the KPI that helps you catch that early before it starts affecting your cash flow or your firm's long-term sustainability. I am going to go deeper into this on the next slide, but it is one of those KPIs that ties everything together. Your revenue and your expenses and your staffing decisions, they all take a part in giving us what is our profit per full-time employee. Now, the lower your profit per employee, the more vulnerable your business is. And again, more revenue alone is not going to save you if there is nothing left over at the end of the day. And there are no shortcuts here. You can't just say, well, let's hire another person and that's going to add revenue. And in fact, adding staff very often can backfire. You could drive up your expenses if there's not a proportional increase in your profit. Hiring is going to impact more than just revenue. It adds complexity, overhead, and your management demands. So it is not a decision I ever want people to take lightly. So what would actually move the needle here? The answer is very simple. It's better systems and smarter processes, and a team that actually knows how to use both of these things. That's where I always see the biggest return. So I always recommend investing in your staff. Train them on the tools you already have. Reinforce these workflows that you've worked hard to develop. Look for ways to make the day-to-day more efficient. Every single hour you save, every task that you can streamline, that is going to result in profit. Also, take a look at how this metric plays out across the various firm sizes. The smaller firms are averaging around $38,000 of profit for every one of their employees. The firms with the 20 to 50, they're about 20% more profitable. And I can tell you the reason they do that is because they have built the infrastructure. They have the training and in their technology or their systems that allows them to scale efficiently. That kind of operational maturity, it doesn't just reduce your friction, it actually generates results in the form of profits. And speaking of maturity, you can go back and look at webinars that I've given. I have given one maybe last year or earlier this year, I forget at this point, on the Firm Maturity Index. I think it's really important to understand where your firm is in its own maturity growth. And the idea of that webinar was really to help you move up in the level of maturity. And that's what allows scaling to happen and profitability to increase. Okay. Next up, number 4 is, what is your break-even multiplier? And I think after that comes the overhead multiplier. It's its close cousin there. So the break-even multiplier, it tells you what do you need to charge on an hourly basis just to cover the costs of running your business. So there is no profit included in this. It's just as it's defined. It's your break even. And here's how it works, how you calculate it. You take your total net expenses. These are the costs that you pay out of your pocket to keep your business running. Please do not include your billable or your reimbursable expenses that are passed on to your clients and then earned back in revenue. And you just take your net costs and you divide that by your direct labor costs. Direct labor means what are the wages and benefits we pay our staff for the proportion of their work that is related to project effort, not the administrative tasks or the marketing. And that is another reason you really need technology like our sponsor or similar ones today that actually is able to look at time card information and relegate project work and costs to that project stuff and to find out what that breaking even rate is and all the work that those employees are doing, some technical, some not, that is not related to project, so it can separate that out. Now, let's say you have a employee that costs you $50 an hour, that includes their benefits. If your break-even multiplier is, as it's shown here, 2.59, which is the average, that means that you need to bill out your average $50 an hour employee at $130 an hour, and that's just to cover your overhead. That's before you make a dime in profit. And it is a very important metric to have in your toolbox just because it gives you this baseline for you to set your fees. If you don't know your break-even multiplier, you're basically guessing when you put together your fees. And it is the guessing that almost always leads to you undercharging for your services. Once you know this number, then you can price your work, do it with confidence, and make sure that your firm isn't just all staying busy doing work and having fun doing that work. You're actually staying in business. Now, most of the solid performing firms come in at around 2.4. That's the center, the middle there, middle quartile, second quartile. But the high performing firms, they're coming in at 1.9. That means they keep their overhead low relative to their billable labor. But it is a little bit nuanced because a lower multiplier isn't automatically good news. Because if your multiplier is too low, it could signal maybe you're underinvesting in key areas like this, investing in software or training. Maybe you're underinvesting in your staff's salaries. Maybe you don't pay them competitively. But on the flip side, if your multiplier is too high, let's say it's above 3.0 as it is in the lower performing firms, it means your expenses are creeping up. It is time for you to take a closer look at where is all of this money going. It is, in fact, a balancing act. A high multiplier paired with low profit, that's a problem. A high multiplier with strong profit, that might indicate you're investing in growth or you're maybe just operating in a high cost market. These are both okay. It's not just about any single number. It's really about the full picture that they're going to paint for you. And it's a reason why I say, please track every one of these metrics over time. Don't just glance at it once a year and then move on. Watch how it's changing based on things you're doing in your firm. If you were able to bring it down from 2.8 to 2.5, that's great. But what else is happening? What's happening with your profitability? If your multiplier has gone up, but your profits also increased, maybe those additional expenses are paying off. So none of these KPIs should be looked at in isolation. They all work together, understand how they relate to one another, and that is where the great insights for your strategic plans are going to come from. Next up is that close cousin, which is the overhead multiplier. Now, this looks at specifically how much overhead you carry for every dollar of your direct labor. It's a kind of a way to measure your firm's internal weight. Like how much does our rent weigh us down, and all of those admin salaries and our insurance and our software, everything that you have to spend money on that isn't directly billable. So mathematically, it is simple. It's um, well, way to figure it out is your break-even multiplier that we looked at a minute ago is just your overhead multiplier plus one. The actual one represents one employee. So you're saying like, well, why would I track both? 1.59 is my overhead, 2.59 is my break even. So here's why you actually want to think about both of these, even though you can easily figure out what's going on here. They give you two different lenses into your business. This one, it's great to understand your internal cost structure. It helps you evaluate how efficiently you run your firm and whether you're carrying too much overhead relative to your project work. The previous one, the break even multiplier, that is what you want when you're setting your fees. It tells you what do you need to bill per hour just to cover the full cost of running your firm. And again, before you make any profit. So they are linked. One focuses that conversation on your efficiency and your internal operations, and the other one just helps you price your work. And I think tracking both of these gives you much more complete picture. Great. So I will not go into detail. It's included in, the downloadable report. Read that information. Just remember that when you review it, focus on your firm's size first, and then look at how you compare across the general quartiles. Wouldn't it be lovely to get firm size and the quartiles within that? Maybe as a BQE provides the 2026 survey, they'll do that as well as the one on geography. Number 6 is your billing multiplier. This is a pretty interesting one. And so a moment ago, we looked at the break-even multiplier. That's rooted in your internal costs. They tell you what you need to charge to cover those expenses. And this one kind of flips that equation. For some of you, you might recognize this as another term. It's called the multiplier achieved. It shows you what you actually earned relative to all of that billable labor that you invest in your projects. So instead of dividing your expenses by your direct labor, you're now dividing your revenue by your direct labor. So let's say, again, your direct labor is $50 an hour. If your multiplier achieved is 3.0, that means you are bringing in $150 an hour of revenue for every $50 per hour of billable work. And that is solid. That's what we expect to see. If your break-even multiplier was 2.7, then you're not just covering your costs. You're actually now running a profitable firm, or at least that should be looked at if this is the only thing you're looking at. There's other things we want to look at. If your multiplier achieved is hovering close to or below your break-even multiplier, clearly you have a problem. What's going on here is you are probably very busy, working hard, I hope, but you're not doing work that generates profit. So what are you going to do when you figure that one out? So the first place I would tell you to look at is scope creep. And I see this all the time. You understand what I'm talking about. Maybe a project manager is trying to keep their client happy, or the principal in charges, and they're like letting you do extra work and you're not flagging that as an additional service. So it might feel like this is good client service. It feels that way at the moment. You want to always please our clients, but that is the decision that actually eats away considerably at your profitability. Another lever you have to look at here are your fees. And that's also part of my topic for my next quarter this year for my webinar series there. Are you charging appropriately for the value you are delivering your clients? Too many firms underprice their services. They do it based on what they think the market typically will charge instead of what their work is actually worth. And sometimes a very small bump in a billing rate, or better yet, shifting toward value-based pricing, that is going to have the same effect on your firm as compound interest might have on your investment accounts or your savings account. A very small change, if you apply it consistently, can transform your experience or your performance. It's an amazing thing. Compound interest. I think hopefully you understand that. So think of this metric as a scorecard. If you do in fact deliver great work and you are staying within scope and you do price your work strategically, your multiplier achieved will reflect it. And again, watch it over time. See if those investments that you are making in your efficiencies or in your marketing are paying off. Now, there is this strong, long-standing rule about the rule of thumb of, the 3.0 multiplier. That's basically what we see going on here. For the low-performing firms, there's kind of a multiplier achieved is only 2.4, but for the top-performing firms, it is in excess of 3.0, that rule of 3x multiplier. And that's what I really want to see. All of you, you should be shooting for no less than 3.25. And that's what we're seeing. 75% of the people in this benchmarking report, they are all using the technology of, in this case, BQE. And so I expect them to be performing well here. And they are exceeding the 3.0 for most cases. By the way, this isn't just about some math. Oh, my multiplier is ending up at, multiplier achieved is 3.3 or something like that. It is about your firm's value. And your multiplier, as it will show up here, is only as strong as your firm's positioning. So if you quote the same fees as everyone else, your client can't differentiate you. So then what you end up doing is lowering a rate. Maybe it's that drive to the bottom. I forget what that term is. Really, you need a very clear, unique selling proposition. This is what means you need a reason for your client to choose your firm over another firm and not make it your fees. And you also want them to choose you and pay you more at the same time. That is, by the way, where we see the larger firms, they pull ahead very often in this, okay? They have built reputations, they have the systems and the depth, in their experience, in order for them to justify higher fees. And you don't have to be a 100+ person firm to do the same thing here. You just need to be very intentional with how you tell the story about the services you provide your clientele. So instead of just defaulting to the market rate, please take a step back. Ask yourself, what's the real value we provide our clients? If your architecture is unique, your fees should be too. And we do have to stop being embarrassed about charging very well for performing services that we love to do. Number 7, net profit margin. This ties it all together. It is the clearest indicator of whether all of your efforts actually do pay off. While every one of these KPIs tells you something specific, what you need to charge, how efficiently you're delivering your work, how you manage your expenses, this one again is about the bottom line. What is left after everything is said and done? At the end of the day, that is going to be the goal, to convert your team's hard work into meaningful profit. That's what gives you the ability to reinvest in your firm, whether that means better tools, higher salaries, which brings you the most qualified staff, which it's a snowball effect. You're going to get better clients, better projects, the more you can elevate all of these things. So it allows you to invest in training programs, or allows you to actually build some financial resilience. Start not relying on a line of credit for a KPI we're going to look at a little bit later, which is about your how you're performing with your receivables. So a healthy net profit margin isn't just some number. Having this means it'll enable you to do everything you want to do within your business. And the good news, again, is most firms in this data set are profitable. The average net margin is at about 20%. percent. If your own firm is at 10%, nothing to shrug off, but really it is nothing to celebrate at all. Because given the amount of risk that is associated with running an architecture firm, the liability, the overhead, the uncertainty of what's going on in the market, 10% leaves you very little margin for error. I truly believe every firm should be targeting at least 20%. Hopefully it's going to be more like we see in our third quartile here. When you have over 20%, you have stability. You've got the breathing room, the ability to invest in your people and your firm's future. Now, if you do compare the results in this benchmarking report to other industry benchmarking reports, you will be impressed at how high they compare. And that is, again, because every firm who is included in this survey has already done an investment in systems. They are using software to manage their project budgets and their expenses, managing their firm's overall economics. These profit margins are often significantly higher than firms that are just operating with some accounting software or maybe running their business off of spreadsheets, which if you've been to any other of my webinars, you know how terrible I feel about spreadsheets. They use systems. They've refined processes. They've figured out how to communicate their value and command better fees. And you'll notice smaller firms are not excluded from this opportunity. For those of you looking to improve your profitability, I do recommend creating case studies that can showcase the experience your client will have of working with your firm, especially for the smaller firms. Your clients probably have never worked with an architect before. It's all very mysterious to them what you really do. What is the value you bring to them? A lot of them think, oh, I just need to get a permit. They don't understand it. So you have to be able to tell that story and make them visualize themselves in that experience with you, with your firm. Don't just have a website filled with beautiful pictures. Your competitors also have a website filled with beautiful pictures. Your client can't discern these things. Give them the stories that make them want to take this journey with your firm. And you will notice in this group of firms, in the 0 to 10 people, they're still at almost 20% profit margin. If you can communicate that story clearly, you will be in a stronger position to charge what your work is truly worth. And your profit margin at this metric is going to reflect that. Now, we're going to spend a little bit of time. I'm sorry on this particular one. This is the utilization rate. I think it is misunderstood. Frankly, I think it's misused. The way you calculate it, it's for your firm in this case. The utilization rate is the percentage of time your entire team spends on billable work. And again, I'm going to emphasize, it is your entire team. Everyone, the marketing people, the administrative people, the principals in your firm. We're not just talking about your production staff. And now we're going to base this on full-time schedules. So that's 2,080 hours a year. And when you do that, right off the bat, you have to take 10% off for paid time off. So that means that at best, 90% is where a firm is going to be. Now, not all of that remaining time should be billable. You have to have internal meetings. You have to spend time on management, business development or marketing, training. I talked about that. I don't know how many times this webinar. All of these things are critical to the health of your business. So when you see that the average here is at 64%, don't assume, oh, ours is higher and that's better. This is my least favorite KPI because it is like stepping on a scale. It will give you a number, but it doesn't really give you the full picture. You might feel good because someone or your firm is at 85%, but that doesn't tell you that the work that they're doing is actually profitable work or valuable work or even part of your strategic work. I have seen team members with these sky-high utilizations who are working on the wrong things. They're working on projects that are not actually able to bill for that work. It should have been an additional service, but it wasn't. This metric is basically very comforting because it's easy for all of us to understand, but it is that simplicity that is misleading. Don't let a high number lull you into thinking things are healthy. You have to look again at profitability and multiplier achieved. And I'm going to tell you, you have to look at my favorite KPI, which is the next one, which is realization. And I think that is where the real insight comes from. How am I doing on time here? Um, Now, there's one other important nuance about the utilization rate is it's going to vary by role. And that's another great thing. This is a blended utilization for everybody in your company. When you're using the right software, you get to look at utilization at every single one of your employees. You can even do it by role and see how, are our managers doing versus our, technical staff, whatever you might have. So you will want to be thinking about the utilization for every individual employee or every employee role, but make sure you're not always trying to max it out at 85 or 90%. You do have to really continue to invest in training your staff, having them spend time away from, being in the woods to actually taking a look at the whole thing. And balance is always going to be the goal with all of these things. So we made it to number 9, my favorite, realization rate. Now, unlike utilization, which tells you how much time your team is spending on projects versus overhead items, realization just tells you how much of that billable value actually is being turned into revenue. In other words, how much are you invoicing and collecting based on the work your team is actually doing on those projects? This is how it works. You take your net revenue and you divide it by the potential billable value of their time worked. So let's say your team works 1,000 billable hours. Make the math easy for me, and your average billing rate is $100 an hour. We see that there is $100,000 in potential revenue. Of course, I'm really simplifying it here. Every one of your employees will have some potential billable value there. You're gonna have to do it all. You get the math. If you ended up invoicing only $83,000 for that $100,000 of potential revenue, that's your realization rate, 83%. You've invoiced 83 cents for every possible dollar that you could have earned. And it is that gap, that loss of 17 cents, that matters. And it's going to come down to your profit too. Low realization that often points to some deeper problems. It might be your scope of work was not clearly defined. Maybe you are discounting too much of the services you provide. Maybe your project managers are letting some work slide into non-billable territory just to keep those clients happy. Maybe your staff is being given poor direction and they're kind of just waffling in their work rather than proceeding with real purpose. And so your utilization rate tells you, oh, these groups of people are working really, really hard on projects. But if that's not materializing in actual revenue, what's the worth of them doing all of that work? Okay. So this realization tells you whether this busyness of what they're doing is actually paying off. And it is one of my favorite metrics because it actually reflects how smart firms are actually thriving. And yes, it is calculated based on the hours worked, but not everything that you bill is tied directly to your hourly rates. I understand that. I, in fact, want you to move as many things away from hourly rates, but this KPI needs this number. Many of you will be pricing your work, based on a fixed fee or value pricing or a percentage of the cost of construction. And when you do that well, you're not just covering for your time, you're actually able to capture value. That is where we can see realization rates for individual firms exceed 100%. And that is what I want out of every one of you. You should exceed 100%. And when you move toward value-based pricing, and then you combine that with some smart investments in your tools and your training, your efficiency, that is when you can unlock the potential to dramatically increase profitability. And that is where your realization rate becomes the proof, because it's no longer being tied just to time, which has a fixed margin. You might say, oh, I'm going to go for 20% margin for the cost of an individual from what they're going to bill out at. And you can go nowhere but down from that. But the only place you can go, you can't go up. The max you're going to ever get is 20%. But if you could figure out a way to no longer tie your revenue to your time, you're going to see it here. And you don't have to think of this as some sort of binary choice, like my clients will not accept fixed fees, or you can actually break it down by phase. So phases like concept design or pre-design or schematic design, these are very often open-ended. It's also a time for your client to experiment with you, to understand if they like even working with your firm. So maybe hourly services will make sense during this phase. But those other phases, design development and contract documents or construction documents, these are really totally under your control. And if you can fix your fees here, and the fees you earn here are probably 60 to 65% of your overall fee. If you can fix that, that's where the magic's going to happen. And every hour that you could save through those better systems or those smarter tools, that hour saved goes to your bottom line. You become the beneficiary of your own efficiency. When all you do is bill hourly, only your client will benefit from your investment in your efficiencies. Think about that. The best you can hope to do is fill that up with more work. And again, that's going to be maxed at whatever that margin is from their costs, from the employee to the billing rate. This is one of the most revealing metrics in your toolkit. If your realization is below 90%, something's clearly going on here. Something's wrong. The scope creep, poor fee structures, lack of systems. If you're over 100%, you have built a firm that captures real value for what you deliver, and that is your goal. And honestly, the good news is it's absolutely, absolutely achievable by everybody here today. Number 10, I'm a little slow here, meandering off point, is what's your average contract value? Now, this number will really vary depending on what is your firm's positioning, what's your business strategy, what's your revenue strategy, because there are firms, this might seem very low for many of you, even the larger firms, but there are contracts that might be small pieces of a much bigger project that you will have with the client, a feasibility study, something of that nature, right? So don't worry about that. This just takes into a pool every single contract that was in the software system and comes out with an average of $51,000. And by the way, depending on your business model, I've worked with firms that have high volume, low contract. Yeah, so one is an engineering firm that like a project would not extend more than 2 to 3 days. Very fast turnaround, but they do a lot of that work and it actually has very high margins. So it doesn't matter to me if I see a firm that's got an average contract value of $15,000 or a firm that's got an average contract value of $250,000. There's a lot of other things you need to look in there, but it's an interesting metric to track over time because as you start to grow your firm or your firm begins to mature, I think you really ought to expect your average contract value to also be increasing. There's reasons it could lead to greater resiliency, especially if a market does dry up. But it depends on you and your business. So I don't want to tell you what yours should be. You'll just notice by looking at the breakdown for firm size, it does make sense that it is scaling as firms get larger and they take on larger, more complex projects, probably multi-year projects, and other firms might be able to churn them out fairly short. So it's another nice KPI to look at. Number 11, your average collection period. So I hinted at this a little bit earlier. This is what shines the light on your firm's cash flow health. This is how you calculate it. You take your current accounts receivable balance. Go look at your bank, your accounting software today and find out what is your receivables balance. Divide it by your total net revenue over the past year. and then you multiply that by 365. The result is going to be the average number of days it takes you between the time you send an invoice and then you actually collect payment on that. By the way, another KPI you can start to think about is the time it takes from when you actually do the service to the time you get paid for it, because you might do the service 30 to 60 days before you even bill your client. And that entire float of time is all a burden to you. It's like a wake up story. Now, the average here is 50 days. This is terrible. I'm sorry. Cash that is sitting in your receivables for almost 2 months is money you're not using to be able to run your business. And we all know you have expenses that are occurring monthly. And for many of the biggest expense you have is your payroll, typically happening twice a month. And if your clients are paying you every 2 months, you've got to sell yourself a problem. And a lot of you will fix that problem by relying on a line of credit. And think about what you're doing when you do this. If you're not simultaneously charging your clients interest, if they're late, you are giving them something worse than an interest-free loan. You are actually giving them a loan and paying the interest on that loan. It's a double hit in the head, because you're not getting that interest money back. You're just happy that they paid you. So I'd like to say, how would you want to improve your collections? Start with electronic invoicing and electronic payment. This is no longer optional. If you still are sending invoices out in the mail, taking 3 days for it to get to your client, or, just sending them a PDF in an email and then waiting to get a check in the mail, please switch right away. By the way, clients will prefer the ease of being able to pay you electronically, and you will get paid faster. And if you are concerned about credit card processing fees, you don't have to do that. The software should allow you to have options. I only want to get an ACH payment, nominal fee. It's a few dollars. And you can even share that with your client if you want, and you can have that in your contract. So please check on your terms in your contracts with your clients. And if you do charge interest, charge the interest. So many firms don't have the backbone to do that. You bill them with the interest charges. Also, rethink your billing cycle. And this is another great benefit of having good technology, because the amount of effort I see firms without good technology to get their invoices out, it's the end of the month, and then they're, doing a lot of manual work, and they don't get their invoices out for a week, or in some cases 2 weeks. So when you have the ability to use software to invoice twice a month, half your clients we bill in the middle of the month, half our clients we bill at the end of the month. That's an instant fix to this problem of cash flow. Even if they're continuing to pay you 60 days, or 50 days, whatever that was in the future, at least your rhythm of revenue is coming in to match your expenses. And then you're going to have to work on catching up and getting that down from 50 days to 30 days or even less. And by the way, my personal belief is with the ability to invoice electronically and pay electronically, the terms of 30 days are old world. 15 days seems a way that you can explore. Yeah, I do understand there are certain client types that won't accept that. Oh, gosh. This is just a page in the report that you're going to see the impact that electronic invoicing has had on saving firms money, at least saving firms on their receivables. Year-over-year revenue growth, this is another sobering number. This one and the one before it are both, to me, the saddest numbers. The average in the industry right now is 6.4% revenue growth. You got to think about what that means if there's a cost of living that's 4.5 or 5%, and inflation. If you are not at least growing at 6.4% right now, you are actually losing position. Now you'll notice the upper quartile here, 21%. This is often due to larger firms that have more resources for business development, or maybe it's mergers, and that kind of boosts their top line revenue. But we are seeing a lot more of that activity in the upper end of the market. And for those of you who are smaller firms, you might be saying, hey, Steve, we're not interested in growth. We're not looking to grow our firm. I understand that's fair, but you have to understand costs are rising each year. So you have to be growing as well just to keep pace with all of that. Now, the last one is your backlog. It's the proportion of your firm's available revenue capacity that is currently under contract. So the higher that number, the less hard you need to hunt for new work. So if you are at a 75% backlog, probably that's a signal that you need to expand your team. And when your backlog is like it is here at 25% or less, something needs to change. Either you need to invest in marketing or you need to plan on downsizing. Uh, Unless you have a business model for which there's a lot of people knocking at your door and you're being very picky and choosy as to who you're going to sign contracts with. Uh, when your firm is at the 50 or the 75%, you've got runway, 6 to 9 months of runway, which is a healthy place to be, but that also may not be where you want to be. Okay. So this is what it looks like for firms. Let's just, somewhere in the 20, 25, 30%. To me, this might be an omen about what is going on in the industry. You should be keeping track. And if you're looking at it and you're looking, wow, last year we were at, you know, uh, 45%. And this year we're at 40, or it's been going downward. To me, these are signals of something that's going on in the general market. Okay, so before we get to Q&A, look for trends. How is each one of these metrics changing year over year, or better yet, quarterly over, quarter over quarter? How do they interact with each other? So if that utilization rate is going up, what's happening to your profit? Is it helping, or are you burning your staff out, or you're maybe missing out on some key internal initiatives you want to do? So everything needs to be strategic. Things need to be informed. Data is your way of making those informed, strategic decisions. And please don't go chasing after any one number in isolation. Try and prove it and have a meeting. We're going to improve everybody's utilization this year. Please don't do that. I do want to thank my friends at BQE Software for inviting me to speak to you today. Rebecca's going to launch a poll question for you, and I want to encourage everybody attending today, no matter what's going on in your office, please, I beg of you, say yes and just allow the folks at BQE to give you a demo of their software. One of their engineers is going to talk directly to you, hear about how you operate your firm and what your pain points are, and they're going to show you how their product can make a difference in your business. A lot of what I've been talking to you about today means having software that can enable you to become a high-performing firm. So please, and by the way, there's only like 3 or 4 systems out on the market today that are really purpose-built for the AE industry. This, to me, is the top product to get out there. They're on the leading edge of technology, and in their customer support, you can read the reviews on them. Just get a demo and see if this would make a difference in your firm. And great, that's all I ask of you. So with that, Rebecca, any questions? And I'm happy to stick around and
Yeah.
answer as long as you guys have those.
We do have a few. So the first one is a two-part question. So how do you tie both approaches, the metric to get your hourly rate and the value-based pricing to charge for projects and get away from charging by the hour? And then how do you establish your hourly rate when first starting your firm without history of projects?
Well, to establish, I'll start with the second one first because it's in top of my mind right now. But if you're starting out and you're trying to figure out what your hourly rate is, you have to understand your costs. So you have to go through that exercise of what does it cost to keep my fledgling office operating every single month, and how many people are available and what percentage of the time is available to work on projects. That simple math is going to get you to your break-even rate, and then you'll be able to figure out that hourly rate. And it's not uncommon to people to have to present an hourly rate. My preference is to make hourly rates in a contract as part of a additional service for anything that's not scoped out in your set of work, but has everything else. What you should be doing is not selling your time. You're not lawyers selling your time, billing 5,000 hours a year, or whatever they may be doing at $1,200 an hour. This is not you. Okay. What you need to explain for those newer firms is why working with you is going to bring them value that they won't get from another firm, and why that journey with you is going to be a journey they want to be on. So yes, you do have to do a little bit of math just to make sure you're not just throwing out numbers going, well, I worked for another architect and they billed me out at $150 an hour, so I'm going to be billing myself out at $175 an hour now that I've opened a door. You don't know if that's even enough for what you're trying to do with your business. And you are now in business and you have a responsibility to run a firm. My business is called, as you can see on screen, the Well-Designed Firm. I think you should be designing your firm like you design your projects. Give it all that thought and consideration and homework so that you provide a amazing product for your client, an amazing firm for you and your future employees or your current employees. And hopefully it will be so valuable that when you are ready to step away, there are people who are going to want that firm, not just want to work with your firm, but want to own that firm. And those generally, my preference is to have your staff definitely want to own a piece of that pie. So I don't know, Rebecca, if I missed the first half of that question, but hopefully it's wrapped somewhere up in my answer.
Yeah, I think so. And then I think we were right at the 1 o'clock hour, but there is another one that's a question that's been there for a while. Recent studies indicate strategic well-being programs for employees results in higher profits. Is BQE tracking that in any metric? If yes, how?
Yeah. Okay. So there is a couple things here. There's an HR module, if you can opt into the HR module with BQE Core, which does some few wonderful things. First, it allows you to create and assign performance reviews for your staff, even salary review, whatever kind of reviews you want to have, and gets it on a calendar. And what's really nice is it can automate it because it'll send notifications to the employee as well as the person tasked with meeting with that employee to talk about, let's say, the performance review. So it's on the calendar. It doesn't get pushed out because, oh, we're busy this week trying to get stuff out. So it helps you manage your staff. It also has an area to track any kinds of events that happen throughout the year, which is really helpful, good and bad. So if you just had a situation or a client just called you and said, I had a great meeting with, Mary, and she hit my points perfectly, you document that in the system so that when you do sit down for your reviews, it's actually giving you things to talk about, whether they're praiseworthy or criticisms, to help make your employees better. And if you know constant touch points with your employees drives their satisfaction, which uh, is I think the impetus of this particular question here. You want to have more of those engagements, or at least the right amount of those engagements, so those employees feel mentored and challenged. So just like you're trying to serve your clients with the product that your employees need to be served really well too. And so not just client relationship management is a part of the BQE core and project management, but also employee management is a part of the tool set. So if you're going to do a demo with the folks at BQE software, do ask them that very same question, and they will show you how you manage your employees' records inside the software.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So just for the sake of time, I think we'll end for now. There are a few other questions. If Steve, maybe you can answer those offline, we can send them back out. That'd be great.
Yeah,
Do want to thank you BQE, and thank you to all of our attendees. We'll hopefully see you at the next one.
thanks all.
Have a
Thanks.
great day. Bye-bye.
Bye all.